All right. Thank you.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
You doing good today?
Yes.
All right. All right. Are you excited to find out what happens with the talking horse Liberty?
Yes.
We're going to travel back in time to the Pilgrims. And let's do a little review first. Last week, we talked a little bit about history. First of all, how many think history is fun? Yeah, I see all those hands. Now, why is it that history, it's not only interesting to see what happened back then, but why is history important? Right here.
History is really important because well, they can bring back great memories when you're an old man that was alive back then. It can bring back memories and tell your family or friends.
That's a really good point. And we hadn't even talked about that. That's true. Can bring back great memories. Right here.
But it also is like I forgot what I was going to say.
That happens to me sometimes. Right here.
And also, history is kind of actually good because, if you don't know history, I forgot what you said last time.
Right here.
So, history is important because, like, you could learn things new, and then you could do for better things in the future.
I'm sorry. I had a hard time hearing you. Say it again.
History is important because you could learn things from that was used in the past and also use it for better things in the future.
You can learn things that you did in the past for better things in the future. Very, very good. Very, very good. Back here.
I was thinking maybe if wait, I forgot the question.
Why is important history? Why is history important to us? Right here.
So we don't repeat bad things they do, and we do repeat good things.
You nailed it. You get a star for the day.
I had it in my head. I forgot.
All of you had good answers, but you nailed it. That was the thing that we taught last week.
I couldn't remember what is it, how she reacted back.
Uh-huh. Okay. So history is so important because we can learn from mistakes of the past so we don't repeat them in the future. Because he who doesn't know history is what?
Doomed forever.
No, not doomed forever, just doomed to repeat it. That means that if you don't know history, you're going to make the same mistakes. But if you know history, you can say, oh, look what they did. That didn't work out very good. Let's not do that again. Okay, that's why history is important. Okay. Yes?
I was watching a video about history, and something happened, like, in the 1600s or whatever, and apparently it was so important and that's why you shouldn't get teardrops tattooed underneath your eyes.
Oh, that's interesting. All right. Yes.
I wonder what happened to the people with World War I who didn't know the mistakes and then they just repeated it with World War II.
That's a really good point, and I've got something to say about that. There was a big mistake made in World War I. At the end of World War I, Germany started that war, okay? And so they put really heavy war reparations on Germany. So heavy that they had a hard time rebuilding, and they were just in poverty, didn't have enough food. And that created a whole lot of turmoil, which led partially to World War II. And we learned from that. So what happens now, if we go to war with a nation, when it's all over and the war's done, instead of covering them with heavy war reparations, make them pay back a whole lot, we help them rebuild their country. That's what we did with after World War II. That's what we did. We said, well, what we did after World War I didn't work, so after World War II, we helped Germany rebuild. And what happened? Now they're our friend and ally. So there's a real good example of how we can learn from history, and that was a really good point you brought up. Okay, one more question, then we're going to get to our story right here.
Well, I know a lot about my ancestry history, and in the beginning of World War II, Hitler killed millions of Jews.
Right.
Which is my people. And, he killed 6 million Jews. 6 million Jews of the Jew population. And millions of Jewish men, women, and children were killed in concentration camps.
Uh-huh.
And things were... That's what Jewish people, and to this day, my dad calls that the dark times.
Uh-huh.
Jews.
Uh-huh.
And I think that should never happen again. Just because Hitler thought that Jews were evil because their citizenship was more gooder than Germany.
Uh-huh.
And he thought Jews were evil during that time.
Uh-huh.
He didn't even need men Jews.
Uh-huh.
That's all I have to say.
Okay. Well, that's a really good point. And the Holocaust was a terrible thing that we hope and pray nothing like that ever happens again.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we see what the Horse Liberty's up to today?
Yes.
Okay, now be sure to pay attention because why?
So we don't forget what happened.
Right, and because there's a test after.
Yeah.
We have the book now too, so I can show the pictures.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I haven't seen the paperback. Oh, that's beautiful.
It is a beautiful book.
Oh my goodness.
So it has all these fun.
That makes me want to order the paperback. That's beautiful.
So,
Wow. Yeah, show them the pictures as we go. Along.
okay.
Okay. So we are ready for chapter 1. The school bell rang and a few more students rushed into the classroom, followed by Principal Sherman. Now you remember what happened last week? They were on the Mayflower, but he jumped back through the time portal back to present day to the classroom. Right? Okay. The school bell rang and a few more students rushed into the classroom, followed by Principal Sherman. The principal of Manchester Middle School was not a small man. If the door frame were any smaller, the principal would have to duck his head and twist his way into the classroom. I stood outside in the hallway as the door closed, but watched and heard what was happening through the door's small window. "Attention, everyone, please take your seats," said the principal with authority. He stood at the front of the classroom, hands at his sides, while his eyes scanned the desks and chairs. "I have an important announcement." The room went silent. It was apparent that Principal Sherman did not tolerate disrespect. "I have some unfortunate news," he said. "Your teacher, Miss Borrington, needed some extra time away from the academy to help care for a sick family member. In the meantime, I feel very fortunate to have found such a qualified replacement. You know that at Manchester Middle School, we have the smartest and most educated teachers. It is my pleasure to introduce you to your substitute, Mr. Revere." As if on cue, I opened the door to the classroom and walked in. As Principal Sherman As Principal Sherman prattled on about the importance of giving me their whole attention, I walked over to the chalkboard and grabbed a piece of chalk. In the upper left corner, I wrote my name, Rush Revere. Principal Sherman then turned to me and said, "Mr. Revere, the students of Manchester's Honors History class are now in your charge." "I know," he said, turning to the class and then back to me. "They will give you their utmost respect." While he walked past me on his way to the door, he lowered his head and whispered, "If the boy in the back row with the red baseball cap gives you any trouble, please send him to my office." Without another word, he opened the door and disappeared. As I turned to the students, I noticed a hand in the air from a girl with blonde hair and two perfectly placed pink bows. Before I had a chance to even call on her, she asked, "Your first name is Rush? Your first name is Rush? That's weird. And why are you dressed like that?" she said. I could tell that this student was all business. If there were a pecking order in this class, she would probably be at the top of the food chain. I looked at my seating chart and replied, "Thank you, Elizabeth. Do you go by Liz?" She rolled her eyes and nearly grunted. "No, unlike some people, I have a real name. It's Elizabeth." "It's a lovely name if you like 4 syllables," I said, winking. "If you must know, my real name is Rusty. But when I was your age, my favorite class was history. In fact, I found myself rushing to history class every day I had it. I would rush from my home, rush down the street, rush through the school until I was sitting at my desk. Eventually, my teacher started calling me Rush. And it stuck. 2 girls leaned over and whispered to each other. One pointed at my pants and giggled. "Ah, yes, my clothing. Certainly my colonial shirt with a waistcoat and an outer coat over it, as well as knickers, stockings, and a 3-cornered hat, was enough to make me look like I was ready to go trick-or-treating." "You're probably wondering about my clothing," I said. "Can anyone guess who I'm dressed as?" A couple of students raised their hands, and I pointed to each one. "George Washington," said the first. "Good guess, but no. However, I am dressed as someone who fought in the same Revolutionary War as George Washington, and they assuredly knew each other." "Are you Thomas Jefferson?" asked another student. "No, however, another good guess. Mr. Jefferson lived during the same time, but I don't think he could ride on a horse fast enough as he was flying from city to city." Then the boy with the red baseball cap raised his hand. He was smirking at me, the kind of look you give with the intent of hitting the bullseye on a dunking machine. Reluctantly, I pointed to him. "Then you must be Peter Pan," he said. The students burst out laughing, and now I understood the warning from Principal Sherman. I quickly glanced at the seating chart and then replied, "Mr. Thomas White, is it?" "I go by Tommy," he said, "and I think Tinkerbell just flew out the window, so you might want to go catch her." Again, the class laughed. I smiled politely and waited until the room was quiet again. Tommy appeared to be gathering up his history book and backpack. "Are you planning to go somewhere, Tommy?" I asked. Aren't you sending me to the principal's office?" he asked matter-of-factly. This time I laughed. I could see that the entire class looked confused. Apparently, Mrs. Borrington did not tolerate the silly antics from a class clown. "Absolutely not. If I did, you would miss the most exciting history lesson of your life." For the record, history is not exciting," Tommy said. "Seriously, I have to stay?" "Well, I hope you choose to stay, I said. "I love your imagination, Tommy. That's exactly the kind of mind I want all of you to have as we discover history together. Discover the stories of the exceptional people who made us who we are today. I dress like this to help your imaginations. For as long as I can remember, my boyhood idol has been the famous American patriot Paul Revere. He was a silversmith. He took part in the Boston Tea Party. He developed a system of lanterns to warn the Minutemen of a British invasion. And of course, the event that he's most famous for is his midnight ride in April of 1775. Tommy eased back into his chair. I could tell he wasn't convinced that history was exciting yet, but I could see a hint of curiosity on his face. Imagine that it's midnight, I said. It's very dark outside. You hear the hoot of an owl and perhaps see bats fly through the air under a full moon. You're on a secret mission to ride as fast as you can to warn the colonists that the British are coming. Raise your hand if you're up for the challenge. Several of the students raised their hands, mostly boys, including Tommy. However, I saw one girl in the back of the class who raised her hand too, but then quickly dropped it. I had noticed this girl earlier. She didn't laugh when the rest of the class laughed. She looked very comfortable sitting in the very last row in the corner. Her dark hair had a blue feather clipped in it. She wore jeans with a hole in one knee, but I could tell it wasn't a fashion statement. I looked at the seating chart and noticed the girl's name, Freedom. What an unusual name. Personally, I couldn't help but be a fan. I see we have several brave souls who are ready to ride like Paul Revere. However, in order for you to ride, you're going to need a horse. I paused. Nothing happened. This time a little louder, I repeated every word slowly. I said we're going to need a horse. I glanced at the door. I paused again. Still nothing happened. The students looked at me very confused. I sighed. We're supposed to have a special guest join us, but it appears he's running late. Excuse me while I go and see if he's lost. I walked toward the door, opened it, and glanced down the hallway. Nothing. I walked down the hall toward the front doors of the school and passed by the door to the teacher's bathroom. I paused, considering my options. I heard the toilet flush, and then I heard what sounded like the clomping of horse hooves. I rolled my eyes and pushed the door open. Sure enough, there stood my horse, Liberty, admiring himself in the mirror. "Liberty!" I shouted. Startled, Liberty bumped into one of the bathroom stalls and knocked the door halfway off its hinges. "You missed your cue and your entrance. I'm trying to teach a history lesson, and you're an important part of that," I said. "You really shouldn't sneak up on large mammals like that," Liberty replied. "See the damage we can cause? Not my fault. I'm the victim here, and I'm pretty sure you're a few minutes early. Besides, it's not like I wear a wristwatch or carry a smartphone," Liberty replied. "My apologies. It would be my pleasure if you would care to join me," I said, sarcastically, as I held open the bathroom door for him. "That's more like it," he said, as he walked past me without looking in my direction. Liberty stuck his head out the door and looked both ways. When he didn't see anyone, we walked toward my classroom. Now remember what we talked about. We don't want to freak out the students the first day by showing them a talking horse, I said. Yes, of course. My lips are sealed," said Liberty, as he pantomimed zipping his lips with his hoof. "Good. Now I'm going back in. Listen for your cue." I returned to the class and was glad to see that no one had left. "I apologize for the delay. As I was saying, it was a midnight ride from Charleston to Lexington when Paul Revere shouted, 'The British are coming! The British are coming!' This would not be complete or even possible without a noble and swift horse. Please welcome our special guest, Liberty." Liberty pushed the door open and strutted into the classroom. The students in the front row leaned back, utterly shocked at what they were seeing. "No way," said Tommy. "You actually brought a horse into school? This is so cool." Most of the class was standing by now. Watching Liberty prance around the front of the room. From the way Liberty was soaking up the attention, you'd think he was standing in the winner's circle at the Kentucky Derby. Several students still looked flabbergasted. They watched Liberty as if he were a mythical unicorn and crowded closer to him. The girl named Freedom, however, stood 5 steps back from the rest of the class. Was she afraid? No, not afraid. Unsure? Yes, that's it. She was looking at the other students, unsure of whether she was welcome to join them in their new discovery. Don't get too close to us, Freedom, said Elizabeth, who stood at least 2 inches taller than the other girls in the class. The horse might smell you and run away. Freedom stepped back to her desk and sat down. Class, I assure you that Liberty is very friendly. There's no need to be alarmed. He doesn't bite, and fortunately, he's potty trained, I said, still irritated that Liberty was late. Liberty snorted at my last comment, clearly insulted, and flicked his tail in my face. His horse hair tickled my nose, and before I could stop it, I sneezed. It happened so fast that Liberty instinctively said, "Bless you." I froze, wondering if anyone had heard that. Liberty froze, clearly worried if I had heard that. The students froze, clearly trying to determine if they had heard that. Finally, one of the students broke the silence and slowly said, "Did your horse just say, 'bless you'?" My horse talk? I stammered, looking back and forth between the students and Liberty. Well, yes. I've taught him a couple of words, sort of like a talking parrot. Words like bless you, I mean. What else do you say when someone else sneezes, I said, trying to laugh it off. Then, without warning, I sneezed again. Achoo! This time, Liberty said, "Gesundheit!" Again, the students were wide-eyed and speechless. This was not going as planned. The horse, as they say, was out of the bag. So I decided to confess, sort of. I sighed again. The truth is, Liberty is an exceptional learner. He's very bright, and of course, he loves American history. So as long as you can keep this a secret, I can keep bringing Liberty to our class. Agreed, I said, hoping it was enough. You would have thought I had just asked if each student wanted $1 million. A flurry of responses came rushing back at me. Yes, okay, I'll keep it secret. I'll do it. I'm in. Well, then, it appears we're unanimous, I replied. Wonderful. I turned to Liberty. Is there anything you'd like to say? Liberty let out a big horsey neigh. The students looked at each other and then back at me. Tommy was the first to speak and said, "Not very impressive for a talking horse." I turned to Liberty and mumbled, "Seriously, that's the best you can do?" Then I turned back to the class and laughed. Liberty has quite the sense of humor, I said, clearing my throat. I looked at Liberty and spread my arm toward the class and said, "Liberty, the jig is up. Your cover has been blown. Go ahead and tell the class whatever you'd like." Liberty smiled, and I could only imagine what was about to come out of his mouth. He inhaled deeply, and then in one long breath, he repeated the preamble of the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America, he said, gasping for air. Spontaneously, Liberty was showered with praises. Awesome! Cool! Sweet! Unbelievable! No way! Wicked! Whoa! Dude! Liberty took a bow or two. Show off, I said, out of the side of my mouth. Liberty ignored me as the students came to the front of the class and surrounded him, touching and petting his mane and fur. You're too kind, he said. Tommy started scratching behind Liberty's neck. Oh, yes, said Liberty. Right there, a little to the right. Yes, that's it. Right behind my left ear. Ah. How do you say that in one breath? Tommy asked. I bet you could do it if you tried, said Liberty. I rolled my eyes and realized that my class was officially horsing around. All right, class, back to your seats, I said. Show and tell is over. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. The students returned to their seats, and I decided we had spent enough time on the introduction and pleasantries. Class, I want you to put away your history books. Of course, books are wonderful, but when I'm teaching, you won't need them. Mr. Revere, Tommy said with his hand in the air, not to be rude, but I'd rather hear Liberty talk. I knew I would love this class, Liberty said, jumping in. You know, horses have been an important part of this country. Oh no, I thought, here he goes. Liberty continued breathlessly. You could say we're the backbone of America. We've lived among the Native Americans. We fought in the greatest battles. We've carried all the early presidents. One of my favorite riders was George Washington. Now, he could ride. He also knew how to brush down a horse. The trick is using long strokes and starting at the top of... Thank you, Liberty, I butted in. You've been a wealth of knowledge, but I think we can save the horse brushing lesson for another day. This time, Tommy butted in. Wait, did he say he carried President George Washington? That was more than 200 years ago. Liberty opened his mouth and then shut it. I think what Liberty was trying to say is, he's referring to my method of teaching, I said quickly, not ready to introduce the concept of a time-traveling horse. That's right, Liberty said, rescuing me. Having Resh Revere as a teacher is like going to the movies. You all like live-action movies, right? No surprise that the students all said yes. I walked over and pulled down the white projector screen. History is a mystery until it is discovered. Your job is to use your imaginations as if you're actually there. I'm going to help you. The movie you are about to see will make it appear as if I've gone back in time. Liberty winked at me. I continued, your job is to try to identify where I'm at, who I'm talking to, what event is happening, and why it is so important. As I was speaking, Liberty walked over to the chalkboard, grabbed a piece of chalk with his teeth, and wrote, where, what, who, why. Together we're going to discover the truth about history, I said. Are you ready? The students nodded. However, I could tell that Tommy was still not convinced. He wanted to be here. As Liberty walked over to dim the lights, I walked over to the digital film projector and attached a small antenna to receive signals from my smartphone. Then I gave the class one final instruction. The movie will start in just a minute. I'm going to walk Liberty outside for a breath of fresh air. I'll return shortly. What about the popcorn? Tommy asked. An excellent idea, Tommy, I replied. Tomorrow you'll have fresh buttered popcorn. A quick flurry of cheers came from the students. And I'll bring the red licorice, Liberty said. Not long ago, I was watching one of my favorite movies, Seabiscuit. It was the final race, and Seabiscuit was coming around the last bend, heading for the finish line, and I, of course, was on the edge of my seat. I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, so I blindly grabbed for a piece of licorice. But instead of eating it, I accidentally stuffed it up my nose. My horse, I thought, the comedian. I rolled my eyes as the class laughed. I pointed Liberty to the door at the back of the room and walked over to join him. When the movie is over, we'll review what you saw, I said. Liberty and I slipped out into the hallway, and I jumped onto Liberty's saddle. I pulled out my smartphone and tapped the camera app and switched it to video mode. As soon as Liberty jumped through the time portal, I would tap record and video our adventure, which would be transmitted to the film projector back in the classroom. It's a miracle that it works, but this way the students could see and hear exactly what Liberty and I were experiencing. Do you have your seasickness pills? Liberty asked. Already took one, I replied. Good, because the last time we were on the Mayflower, you looked like green jello, he said with a laugh. No time to spare, Liberty, let's go. Liberty bounded down the hall and said, rush, rush, rushing to history. A vertical swirling hole of purple and gold began opening in the middle of the hallway. It grew in size as Liberty approached. I grabbed tighter to the horn on Liberty's saddle and shouted, 1620, Holland, the Pilgrims. All I could do now was hope we landed on dry ground. Right before Liberty jumped through the time portal, I had the feeling we were being watched. I turned my head, and the last thing I saw was someone's head dart back into the classroom. Someone with long, dark hair and a flash of blue. And that's the end of chapter 1. That's a cliffhanger, isn't it?
Oh, and it's also 2:30.
Yes, it is. Okay, you know what time it is now? Time for a test.
Yay! Okay, so pull out your history folders. You have the quizzes in there. So pull out the quiz you did last week.
Don't tell your
There's 2 others attached to it. It looks like this. In your history folder.
Yes.
I have enough cliffhangers with TV shows.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna go stop something and there's a button and it's almost too late.
You've done the first 2 pages already, so flip to the second 2. Yes, Mr. Louise. What? Were you here last Thursday?
No. I wasn't.
It'll say chapter 1. Keep it in your social studies.
Everybody ready?
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to go through this together. Quiz chapter 1, question 1. Who first introduces Rush Revere to the class? Chloe. Right there. You got it. That's it. Principal Sherman. Write that down. Yes?
My last name is Sherman.
Oh, wow.
You have a principal? You need to remember
Well-
to bring you a cup of water or a water bottle next time.
Yeah,
Because you're reading so much.
that was a long chapter.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, number 2. What is the name of the middle school where Rush Revere teaches? Yes.
I know it's something with elementary school.
Well, you're right about that. Well, actually, you're not right. You're close.
Middle school?
Yeah. But what's the full name? Anybody else? Don't raise your hand if you don't know the answer. Oh, okay. Sorry. What is the name of the middle school where Rush Revere teaches? Nobody's getting that one? Okay. Right back here in the ears. Those are really cute. Oh, you forgot? Okay. I thought I saw your hand. Okay. So the answer is Manchester Middle School.
Manchester. Manchester.
Why is it so funny?
How do you spell sister? Manchester what?
Middle school?
Middle school.
That's all one word.
Number 3. What is the name of the teacher who Rush Revere substituted for? Yes? Yeah. Did you have your hand up?
I'm trying to think. I can't remember.
Okay, right here.
This is boring.
There you go, Miss Borrington. I wonder, was she boring, do you think? Makes you wonder.
Is it Mrs. or Miss?
It's Miss.
She has 2 R's in her name. 2 R's.
Maybe the name speaks for itself.
Yeah, there you go.
Miss what?
Borrington.
I guess she is boring.
Well, I would say that the class is finding the talking time-traveling horse more interesting than Miss Borrington.
Definitely.
Number 4. What is Rush Revere wearing when he is first introduced to the class? Right over here.
Like a blue coat thing.
Uh-huh, yes, that's correct. Okay, right here.
It's dressed up as Paul Revere.
That's pretty close too. Back here.
Isn't it Paul Revere's coat?
That's what you just said.
Well, that was already said here.
And he was wearing green, kind of short, tacky pants.
I honestly don't remember if they said the color. But the answer is colonial clothing. Specifically, a colonial shirt with a waistcoat and an outer coat over it, as well as knickers, stockings, and a 3-cornered hat.
Huh?
Do we have a picture?
I do, I was showing it.
Is it green?
They're like khaki.
Yeah,
Oh,
tacky
okay.
green.
All right. You're right then. It's green or khaki. All righty.
Do we have to write all of that?
No, colonial clothing will do.
Okay.
Colonial.
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 That's not the best I could spell it.
You got it right.
Colonial what?
Except that's an A.
Okay, number 5. Who is the class clown in Rush Revere's class? Right here. Right, Tommy.
They wrote it wearing a red baseball cap. Something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Number 6. Which girl sat at the back of the class with a blue feather in her dark hair?
Freedom?
Yes. That's correct. Freedom. Interesting name. Number 7. Who is the special guest coming to visit the classroom? Who haven't I called on yet? Over here in the blue. You, yeah, you.
Liberty.
Right, Liberty. And number 8. Who was not nice to Freedom in the classroom?
The girl, the
Right here. I'm sorry?
The girl with the bow in her hair.
Ponytail.
Yeah, but we need a name. Anybody know the name? Okay, right back here.
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth? Yes, that's right.
When was she not? What's she mean?
Well, she didn't smell good.
Yeah, exactly.
What was her name again?
Elizabeth.
I don't know how to spell Elizabeth.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, just the way it sounds. Sound it out. Elizabeth.
Keep on going.
Number 9. What did Liberty read aloud in the classroom? Actually, he didn't read it. He quoted it right here.
Bless you and present
Well, he said that, but there's something that he quoted right here.
the Constitution.
Yeah, you're right. He didn't read the whole Constitution, but he read the preamble to the Constitution. That's right. Preamble. It's P-R-E, amble, A-M-B-L-E, preamble, all one word, to the Constitution. We're almost done. Well, we're not going to have time to do that as a class, so if you could do that sometime before next week, fill that out, and then next week we can go through that.
Okay.
Number 10. What phrase does Liberty say when he goes through the time portal?
Rush history.
Yeah, rushing to history. Okay, how many can't wait to next week to see what happens? Do you like it? Say yay if you do. All right. Thank you for being so attentive, and I'll see you next week, and we'll travel back in history along with Rush, Revere, and Liberty. Sound good?
Yeah. What do we tell Mr. Mark?
You're welcome.
We appreciate it. All right, once you have it back in your folders and you clear your desk, I'm going to give, what team was it? Orange team? Check out 2? Okay.
Yeah, it was orange team.
Orange team was 2. Okay, we're still not quite done yet. I'm going to look for following instructions right now. Listen carefully. You have to clear off your desk totally for the weekend.